politically and socially minded. But man, it is not an easy record by any stretch. If you've heard it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, again, go into it with an open mind. Go into it thinking that this is very different Depeche, at least in my opinion. This is a very different Depeche Mode album than we've had in a long, long time. And to a certain extent, it really, even though it sounds almost nothing like it, it really does harken back to Construction Time Again in its delivery. And again, the songs don't sound the same, but when I think about songs like Pipeline, and then I think about certain tracks on Spirit, I go, okay, yeah. Because Pipeline was kind of an oddball track and a little bit, a little bit out of the norm, but still a really cool song. So I'm not prepared yet to go and give it like a 10 ranking. I will say that at the moment, and I've probably heard the album now. Yesterday was like 4. Listened to it back and forth from work. I listened to it at home. So I've probably listened to it 5 or 6 times, maybe 7 when you combine me skipping around and listening to a couple songs over and over again. I feel confident in saying that this is, for me, the best Depeche Mode release since Songs of Faith and Devotion. And it gets me excited that hopefully they'll continue to make music, and hopefully they won't stick to this 4-year cycle, because I don't want to wait to hear them do more. Now, I want to go through a breakdown, and basically what I did was I grabbed a notepad, and when I listened to the album for the first time, I just sort of wrote down my instinctive reactions. And so I want to just run through the record. It's hard to say record or album, right? Somebody was not giving me a hard time, but they asked me on Twitter. They were like, when I said, I really like this Depeche Mode album, and they said, album? CD? Record? And I go, yeah, what do we call it nowadays, right? I mean, I guess you still call it a CD if you're getting a CD, but they're more just releases now. So I'll go through track by track of Spirit and give you my instinctive reaction on it and what I wrote down. And it's been kind of fun because I went through and looked at my notes, and my opinion of a few songs that have changed just on, a handful of other listens. And then I want to dive into some of these emails that I received in the course of the past few days that I want to share with you. And again, please send me your thoughts on the album. I really would love to hear what you think. I was talking with a couple of fans of the podcast last night. Gabriella, for one, had reached out, and she had a chance to hear it. And she's been listening to the podcast since day one. And we had a brief back and forth, just kind of talking about what songs we liked. And she really liked the album as well, so that got me excited too. So, all right, let's go ahead and let's break this down. And we'll start off here, obviously, with the beginning of the album, with Going Backwards. I was surprised when I really like the song a lot. It does fit in the mold of opening Depeche Mode tracks. There was just always something really unique about the first song on a Depeche Mode album, and Going Backwards certainly continues that trend. It was a lot more, I don't want to say timid, but it's fairly mellow. And it was mellow in a way that I didn't expect, but it really worked to good effect. And really kind of, to me, sets the stage. It doesn't come out as bombastic. Welcome to My World was somewhat subdued, but it still had it still has kind of an epic feel, and this is like that as well, but it certainly isn't In Chains. It certainly isn't A Pain That I'm Used To. It certainly isn't I Feel You, right? It's not Barrel of a Gun by any stretch. But I really do like the song, and it's a really good opener. Moving over towards, Where's the Revolution? Most of you have all heard it now. Don't want to go into a lot of detail except to say that it really works as all right, we're introduced to this record with Going Backwards, and then here comes all right, let's get into it. Here's Where's the Revolution? And it's really tough to say if Where's the Revolution hadn't been the lead single, if I would frame it the way that I'm framing it, because I look at Where's the Revolution and I say to myself, well, that's kind of the standout track of the record, that is a little bit different than everything else. But I think that's only because that's the first song we heard. I mean, you could take any one of these songs and throw it out there and like Cover Me, which we'll talk about quite a bit. Cover Me is another one where you go, well, if they had released Cover Me first, and then I heard that outside the album, then I heard the album, I'd be saying, well, Cover Me certainly is the standout track. So it's a little bit unfair because I think the fact that the singles are set apart and it's the first introduction to a new record, we often associate it with it being different. But really, in the context of the whole record, you know, the whole release, it really does flow and fit really well. Worst Crime is up next, and it's my least favorite track on the album. There was talk, I know, and I mentioned this last week, that James Ford wanted to make a 10-track record, but the band wanted to add a couple more songs. I would argue that if we were going to make it a 10-track record, I would have pitched off Worst Crime for sure. The second track I would have gotten rid of is debatable, and we'll get to that, but Worst Crime I certainly would have gotten rid of. I know a lot of people are equating it to Soul Savers. I'm usually a big fan of Dave's, and I've been a big fan of Dave's solo stuff. It's not the strongest, but I've really enjoyed it. I just could not get into Soul Savers. It just did not do anything for me. Maybe I didn't give it enough of a chance, but I much prefer Dave's solo work. And this one's a bit of an oddball, just to deviate for a second. If you haven't heard Nostalgia by Mirror, okay, so the band is Mirror, the song is Nostalgia, it's sung by Dave. Do yourself a favor, go find it as soon as the podcast is over. Maybe I'll include it next week. I don't have it queued up right now. But go find it. You will not be disappointed. It's one of the. It's kind of in the same vein as Saw Something, one of Dave's other solo records from Hourglass. But it's one of those songs that I wish was the Depeche Mode song. It's that good. Very mellow. It's very epic. But again, Mirror, Nostalgia, the vocals are all Dave, music is by Mirror, fantastic track, go and find it. I would replace Nostalgia with Worst Crime any day of the week, although it wouldn't quite fit on the record, be that as it may. All right, so next on the next album, or next song, is Scum. And Scum is the weird one, but oddly it works in a way that I didn't think it was going to work. It's one of the songs that you heard in the snippets from the teaser. It's one of the songs. I think actually it's actually the first one that you hear. It comes off in the beginning and it's just a crazy track. It almost sounds like the timing isn't there, but the timing is there. When Dave is singing "Hey Scum" and you're kind of listening to it and it's like, whoa, that's really jarring. Did they screw the track up? But then suddenly, like, your brain almost adjusts to it, and it ends up working, and it becomes this really strange song that I dig a lot. It almost is a bit of mental trickery. If you take a piece of dialogue and you loop it over and over again, 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 it ends up taking on a musical quality. That wasn't me looped. I was just doing it over and over again to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. But if you take a piece of dialogue and you just loop it, it ends up automatically taking on a musical quality to it. Our brain just automatically functions and does that. I mean, that's how sampling and looping works a lot of the time. With Scum, something strange happens because as you get further into the track, it ends up working. Your brain adjusts to it, and it becomes this really unique and different out-of-the-box Depeche Mode song, which is something that we haven't had in a long time. I mean, the closest song that I can think to that really kind of gets down that road is Comatose, the Martin Gore track Comatose off of Exciter. That song shouldn't work, but it does. It just, there's no real good rhythm to it. The beats are kind of all over the place, but in musically speaking, it's very abstract, but it absolutely works, and that's what Scum does. But it reminds me a lot of sort of older Depeche. When you go back and you go back further and you look at, say, Music for the Masses, and To Have and to Hold Not isn't the best example, but it's there. It's just, it deviates from everything else, and yet it still sounds like it fits on the album. Next, On next on Spirit is You Move. And when you start getting into You Move, this is when I wrote down, going over my notes, I just said, this is not your average Depeche Mode album. Sounds old school. It's got an industrial edge to it while still sounding fresh. And again, some people had said that this was like a Delta Machine 2, and that it had a lot of relations to it and reminded a lot of that. And I don't get any of that at all. This sounds fresh and new. It deviates from previous Depeche Mode albums because the lyrical content is different, and so you're not getting the pain and suffering in various tempos that you normally get with like Playing the Angel, where the songs had really become about relationships and love and lost for the most part. That was just a very consistent theme, and I was fine with that. But here, they do tackle social issues. And, I mean, You Move is one that's more of an emotional, relationship-based. But this song still just sounds drastically different than anything that we've gotten from the band in a long, long time. And then you get to just the standout track on the album for me. And it's probably one of my favorite ones so far, and that's Cover Me. Cover Me it's just so good. And it changes up at the end, but it changes up in a good way. Depeche is known for taking a track and stretching it out and adding almost a soundtrack to the end of it. Judas, I Want It All, where it kind of continues going at the end. They've done this type of thing before, but they do it in such an effective way when you get into the instrumental portion of it at the end of Cover Me. Lyrically speaking, it's epic, right? When Dave sings, and again, spoiler alert if you haven't heard it yet, but when Dave sings the Northern Lights line, I mean, it's just some of the best singing I've heard from Dave in so long. That song is it's gut-wrenching. And I wrote down here, so good, beautiful, so electronic, amazing. It really is. It's a tribute to this band that after all these years, they can still deliver a song like that. Just incredible. Next up is the first Martin Gore song, and I will say that while the last track on the album, Fail, is growing on me, I really wish that we could get back to some Martin Gore of old. You go back to, on the tour you do, but not tonight, right? But you go back to Home, you go back to, It Doesn't Matter Too, you go back to Somebody. I mean, just start pull off the Martin Gore song, Blue Dress. Martin has not reached that level in so long. I would argue that the Breathe on and Comatose on Exciter were the last really good ones. There's other Martin Gore songs that I like, don't misunderstand, but he just hasn't reached that level to where he used to be, where, Martin Gore songs were like it's a Martin song, right? Eternal fits into that. Eternal works on the record, however, because it's so short. It feels like an interlude. It reminds me of Black Celebration and Sometimes. Another track that I've rediscovered lately that I've been listening to quite a bit. Sometimes works because it's short, succinct, and to the point. Eternal works because it gives you a break after Cover Me. The album almost feels like their concerts, right? We kind of slow it down with Cover Me, we slow it way down with Eternal, and then we pick it back up with the next track. And so I wrote here, Compulsion 2, it reminds me of his second solo effort, of cover albums, which I like. Wasn't my favorite. There's some couple of really good standout tracks on that, but I much prefer the band doing their own stuff than covers of other people's stuff. And again, short, it's almost an interlude on the record. So it is not a track that I'll be skipping over. I mean, so far right now, the only track that I'll end up skipping over is Worst Crime. And even then, I may try to hang with it to see if it grows on me. But everything else on the record, I'm going to listen to all the way through, including Eternal, just because, again, it kind of feels like, a couple of minutes, gives you a break, and then we're into Poison Heart. And I just wrote one word for Poison Heart. I just wrote grand. That's the song that I believe Dave and Martin wrote together